The capsizing boat known as the corporate press sunk further into an ocean of its own tears this week after a series of hilarious missteps. To start things off, ABC, because of anchor George Stephanopoulos, lost a $15 million lawsuit to President Trump. And if that didn't hurt their pride bad enough, oh, sweet irony, they have to give that money to the Donald Trump Presidential Library. You know that's gotta hurt. Then, CNN, in a stunning and brave video, followed along with a group of Syrian rebels as they liberated a man from one of Assad's many prisons. When it was later pointed out they were accidentally celebrating the release of a notorious torturer who was only in prison for being too brutal, they put out a deeply apologetic retraction that said, "Oops." Anyway, come join me as we laugh at these sad clowns and their hilarious misfortune. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, hello everyone. Today's topics, we are going to cover a couple of different things. We're going to talk about that ABC lawsuit with Donald Trump. We are going to talk about CNN accidentally releasing a murderer and the Canadian healthcare system that just needlessly amputated a woman's leg. But first, before we get into all that, our favorite comment from last week. Our favorite comment comes from RevP369, who writes, quote, "It's not the bourgeoisie that we're after. It's the ultra-elites that are the problem. And there are so many of those to get through that it'll take quite some time to get to the rest of us." Okay, Rev P. First of all, let's just take a step back here. Let's calm down a little bit. There is no call for violence that is appropriate at any point, really. I mean, I can't say any point. Obviously, there are some. But in America, in 2024, calling for violence against anyone is completely unacceptable. And I think you're making a mistake. There's no distinction between the bourgeoisie and the ultra-elite. You're just calling them something else. You're just calling them a different name. Who do you think, when Marx was writing about the capitalist class he was talking about? At the time, they were just the ultra-elite of the society that he lived in. He just gave them a name. You're calling the bourgeoisie the ultra-elite, but it's the same thing. You go after people. Eventually, if you unleash a weapon of violence, it doesn't matter what it is. If you unleash a tactic or a weapon, you always have to be prepared for it to be turned around and pointed back at you. So you can't say, well, there's too many of them. They'll never get to me. That's not the way it works. They always get to you. That's how it works in reality. So don't be one of those people who thinks that it's okay or appropriate when it's the other people that it's happening to, because you have to think it could happen to you. There's actually, we don't normally talk this much about our favorite comment, but I just had this thought. I can't remember, I wish I could remember the political philosopher who came up with this, but there is a great experiment to tell how just and fair a society is, which is you have to make the rules of a society so that you don't know who you're going to be in the society, and it's going to be fair to you, meaning that I could randomly draw and feel like I had a fair share in the society. So it's how you, for example, societies that historically have discriminated. Like if you go back in the America in 1700, you say, well, it wasn't a fair society, because if I drew the card that said, well, guess what? You had to go through life as a black man. That's not fair. I'm a slave. That's no good. So, or if you go to Saudi Arabia and you draw a card that says you're going to be a woman, then that's not fair. Your life isn't the same as everybody else, and it's worse by objective measures. So you say this is how you determine whether or not societies are fair and just. So if you draw a card in your scenario, Rev P, and you say, hey, I drew the card, I get to be this guy who's one of the ultra elite, you say, well, that's great. You're going to have money, you're going to have power, you're going to have fame, but then you also have to deal with calls of violence. And in the case of this CEO from United Healthcare we talked about last week, actual assassination. So not great. You don't want that. You don't want to draw the card that says you're going to be the target of an assassination because you fill some category. Anyway, just think about that. Something to think about for the next week. Leave some more comments. Anyway, let's move on to our first topic. Let's talk about this ABC News lawsuit with Donald Trump. It's kind of funny that this happened, and the blowback on the internet has been extreme and a little unhinged in some cases, but it's hilarious from my perspective, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But first, let's go through the facts as we know them. George Stephanopoulos, who's one of the anchors, I can't remember the name off the top of my head of his show on ABC. I guarantee you I don't watch it. I don't watch cable news. Cable news is a waste of time. It's basically useless at this point. There are some people on there who are nice and good, some people who are very smart, people who have shows on cable news. I'm not discounting any of that. I'm just saying, due to the way that the money is incentivized in cable news, it is very last-minute, 24-hour news cycle nonsense. You don't get into any deep discussions because of the nature of the format, and it really is not a good place to go to learn things. So it's entertainment. That's what it is. It's entertainment like people watch sports or sitcoms. It's entertainment for people. So George Stephanopoulos hosts some show. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, on ABC. Earlier this year, he was conducting an interview with Nancy Mace. As you may know, she's getting pretty famous out there, Nancy Mace. And during the interview, he made repeated claims that how could Nancy Mace, as a former sexual assault survivor herself, support Donald Trump? And this was a claim that George Stephanopoulos made, who was found liable for rape. And he made that claim numerous times. Well, this is not true. This is not true. And Donald Trump sued him for defamation based on this claim that I think they said George Stephanopoulos made, I think it was 15 times, somewhere around there, in the interview, where he repeatedly came back to this claim that said Donald Trump was found liable for rape, which, again, not true. Donald Trump was, and this is a distinction, but it's an important distinction. Donald Trump was found liable in New York for, the exact thing was, sexual battery and defamation. So this is from the E. Jean Carroll thing. I'm not going to talk about that case. It seems ridiculous to me, and New York is making a clown show of itself with their prosecution and the cases around Donald Trump. I'm not going to get into it because we've gone over it. It's nonsense. It really is. But George Stephanopoulos made a claim that is objectively not true. There is a legal difference and a definite moral difference between sexual battery and rape. There just is. It's a very important distinction that the judge made sure to explicitly say he was not found guilty by New York law for rape. The judge said that. So, not true. George Stephanopoulos made this claim multiple times. Donald Trump sued for defamation. George Stephanopoulos was defiant. He came out and said, this is ridiculous. I'm doing my job as a journalist and blah, 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 whatever his regular defense was going to be. And it turned out that I think ABC is owned by a parent company, which is Disney. Disney owns ABC. They wanted to settle the lawsuit. So they settled the lawsuit. Now, the reason for this is up for debate because they have not come out and explicitly said why they are settling the lawsuit. There are some theories. I have my own I'll tell you about. But they have to pay $16 million to Donald Trump, $15 million to Donald Trump's presidential library, and $1 million in attorney fees that Donald Trump owes. So people are upset about this. There's a lot of blowback from people on the left who are saying that Disney is just trying to bow and kiss the ring, or that this sets a bad precedent for freedom of the press and all this stuff. And I don't find any of that to be true. I don't think that Disney is trying to kiss the ring in a way that they're not going to just start going along with the MAGA or Donald Trump agenda. That's not about to happen. But and the chilling of the free speech coming from people on the left is hilarious to me. The people who try and censor free speech are the people on the left. It's not the right is not trying to dismantle the press or tell people what they can and can't say. That's just not happening anymore. It has happened historically on the right. It's not right now. The left is the party who's interested in censoring free speech. Look at your social media platforms and tell me which types of content get taken down or quote-unquote moderated. It's not left-wing content. It is right-wing content that gets taken down and moderated under the guise of hate speech or whatever they want to call things this day. It's ridiculous. So that's not true. This idea, though, that Disney wants to kiss the ring. Here's my theory of why this happened the way it did. I think ABC was absolutely guilty of defamation. Now, in a legal sense, it's almost hard to prove defamation against a public figure because, one, you're allowed to have opinions about public figures, especially politicians. It's very difficult for a politician to win a defamation lawsuit, which is why some people are upset. They think that Disney would have won the lawsuit if it had gone further. But what is true, and the reason for that is because you have to prove malice. Not only do you have to prove that someone said something that they that's not true, which George Stephanopoulos did objectively. You have to then prove malice, that he was saying this thing to slander Donald Trump's reputation. You have to prove that, which is the hard part to prove. Now, could they? Maybe. George Stephanopoulos is a Clinton lackey and basically a hack for the Democrats. So possibly. Now, the reason why, and this is my theory to get back to, my theory of why Disney wanted to settle this lawsuit. It's not necessarily because they thought they were going to lose. The reason is because if you go to trial, you are open to discovery. What does that mean? That means that the attorneys for Donald Trump could request basically all communications from George Stephanopoulos and people at ABC about the interview or around the time of the interview and go through all of it. And I think that they were worried that it was going to make ABC look like a partisan organization, which it is, and it was going to make their company look bad, which was actually going to cost them more money than just settling. It certainly would have cost them more money. And they also could have possibly lost the election, because all you have to do is find George Stephanopoulos saying negative things about Donald Trump. Do we believe that he never did that in text messages or email? I don't think so. I think he probably did. So I think they knew they were going to lose, and also they didn't want to go through discovery because of all the embarrassment that would have brought. It's not going to have a chilling effect on the corporate press. They're not going to be fair. There's a reason, by the way, and I'm sure people have known this. I'm sure we've gone over this in the past. There is a reason why we use the term corporate press. It's not the media that we're concerned about. It's not really print journalism necessarily. It's not online publications in a nutshell. This idea of the corporate press, though, these large companies that own news outlets that all skew one way. It is very difficult. I don't mind when people cover the news and have a bias. That doesn't bother me at all. What drives me insane is when people pretend to be unbiased in their coverage of the news. That is ridiculous. To sit there and say you're nonpartisan. I don't care. If somebody goes after both sides, I prefer that. I don't want anyone to be friendly with my side and difficult with the other side. I would like someone who goes after both sides. And I think that should be the role of the media. It's not to play nice with politicians. It's to hold them accountable. The problem for our current media, and the reason we use the corporate press, is because the corporate press is a propaganda wing for the Democrat Party. Even Fox News doesn't like Donald Trump. And you can say whatever you like about the hosts on there or what you think. The overwhelming majority of the major, quote-unquote, major mainstream media, traditional media, is Democrat-leaning. And this is a gigantic problem for our country because it no longer represents the American people. It represents the Democratic Party. And a lot of Americans are Democrats. But the corporate press swings further left than most Americans. So it has this weird way of skewing the conversation further left than most Americans where most Americans would be comfortable having the conversation. So we don't like the corporate press. And also, they don't have as much power as they used to, and they resent the people for it. They think that people like Joe Rogan are idiots, and they've never listened to his show, and they don't realize that the people he has on there, all he does is let them talk. And that's all his job is. And he has people on from the left. He had Bernie Sanders on, but he had Tulsi Gabbard before Tulsi Gabbard was a Republican. He would have had Kamala Harris on the podcast. And all he does is talk to people. And people hate him for it. And it makes no sense to me because he came out and endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2020. And yet people are like, oh, he's the right-wing, terrible guy. He was a vaccine skeptic, blah, blah, blah. The corporate press has an interest in holding the conversation because that's where they make their money. We don't trust them. We don't like them. They are a propaganda wing for the Democratic Party. It makes no sense to put faith in them to be good. This lawsuit that Donald Trump just won is not going to reset that conversation. It's funny. It is because ABC has to pay Donald Trump to Donald Trump's presidential library, which, again, is ironic and hilarious because Donald Trump having to pay to fund the presidential library of a man that you detest, to me, is hilarious. That it just is. But they're not going to learn a lesson from this. They have too much money. Disney is worth billions of dollars. I have no idea how many billions, but it's worth billions of dollars. This $15 million is nothing to them. $16 million is nothing to them. It's a drop in the bucket. They don't care about that. That's probably an average day of running the theme park. And yet, people are upset because they think this is going to have an effect. It's not. I promise you. It doesn't do anything. It's funny. It's a funny story, but it doesn't do anything. The corporate press is losing its prestige because they can't help themselves, because their hatred for Donald Trump has driven them insane, and it makes them do stupid things. It's costing them money. It's costing them viewers, and it's costing them money because they do not have a rational take on Donald Trump. Now, many people don't. Many people look at him and think that he is the worst thing that ever happened to America. In 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, that election, you could make an argument that Donald Trump was a threat to America. You could. I made not necessarily a threat to America. I made an argument I didn't think he would be a good president at that time. Because when you look at the factors, it was a totally reasonable, rational concern that this guy who had no experience in politics was going to come in there, wouldn't know how to govern, and things would just run off the rails. And I thought that was a totally reasonable perspective. You can't make that case in 2024 and be a reasonable, rational person and act like Donald Trump is the next coming of Mussolini. And because it makes no sense, because he was already president. And you have to point to the thing that he did that you say, this was him being a total dictator. And I go, where was the thing? I don't see the thing. ABC can't point to the thing, but they can say that Donald Trump's a rapist. And he's been found guilty of 11 billion crimes. And he's a 3,800 million times felon. And he's the worst thing that ever happened. And he's a Russian agent. And they can say all this nonsense, but it doesn't resonate with people anymore because people can have their own eyes. They have their own opinions, and they lived through 4 years of Donald Trump as the president. And they said, yeah, I don't remember us all having to stand in the bread lines. I don't remember everybody having to bow in fealty to Donald Trump once a day and say a prayer to our great leader. I don't remember these things. I don't remember the gulags. I don't remember the concentration camps. Where were they for those 4 years? Did he forget to do them? Oh, this time he's going to do them. This time he's going to do all those things, those Hitler-like things. The only thing they have to point to is January 6th, and I don't care. I just don't. I don't care about January 6th. I think it was stupid. I think the people who stormed the Capitol were dumb. It wasn't a threat to democracy. Donald Trump didn't really do anything wrong. That's my opinion. And we have a copy of the Mueller report back here on the bookshelf, and I've read it. Hold on. Let me stop. I haven't read the whole thing. I have read the salacious parts of the report that were the most damning parts of the report. It's 450 pages of nonsense. Seriously, I can sum up the Mueller report in a couple minutes for you. There are two parts of the Mueller report. There's part one and part two. Part one is about the Russian collusion narrative. Part two is about the obstruction of justice charges. The Mueller report, the first part of the report, and this is absolutely verifiable fact, go read the thing yourself. Part one of the report says that they found no evidence of collusion between Donald Trump and Russia. They say we don't exonerate him of it. We're not saying he's completely innocent, but we have found no credible collusion between the Donald Trump campaign and Russia. They have found no tit for tat. They don't know what Donald Trump was given. They know a bunch of Russians said at different points that we have dirt on Hillary Clinton. That's what Russians said. But they said, we don't know what Donald Trump ever did for Russia, and we don't know that Donald Trump ever got dirt on Hillary Clinton from Russia. Russia said they had it, and the biggest one they have was a meeting between Trump Jr. and someone who claimed to be someone from Russia with dirt on Hillary Clinton, but no dirt was exchanged, and they say, well, that's the big meeting. Nothing ever happened. So Mueller says in the report, they have absolutely no credible collusion between Donald Trump and Russia. Part two, obstruction of justice, has to do with Donald Trump being pissed that he's being investigated, and no one will say that he himself is not under investigation. That's the obstruction of justice. Him being mad that James Comey wouldn't come out and say he wasn't personally under investigation, and the head of the DOJ recusing himself and wouldn't say he's not part of the investigation, and him wanting to fire people who wouldn't say that he had been exonerated, which is true. He was not under investigation in the first part of the Robert Mueller Russia report, and the obstruction of justice is all about him wanting to fire people who wouldn't say he was exonerated. It's a totally nonsensical thing. The part two, the thing that Donald Trump may have been guilty of is obstruction of justice on a charge that they completely said they didn't have any evidence he committed. So he obstructed justice in an investigation into something he didn't do. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's all they have. They have Russiagate, which is nonsense. They have January 6th, which is nonsense. And the media, because of this, just leans into Donald Trump being Hitler. You remember what it was like. Everyone remembers what it was like. Anyway, we're getting off topic here. But the whole thing is, in summation, the corporate press is ridiculous. This is hilarious to watch them flounder and fail because of their own bias towards the left. They refuse to just moderate slightly and give Donald Trump a chance. I voted for Donald Trump, and I voted for him in 2020. I voted for him in 2024. I voted for I can give you my priors. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. Those are all the elections I've got to vote in. That is how I voted in all of them. And it is no shame to me to say, like, I voted for Donald Trump because the Democrats just refuse to listen to reason. There's no historically, I'm not a Republican. I've always been very socially liberal is what I would say, and more fiscally conservative, but I used to believe in a larger welfare state. I used to believe all these things. I gave Donald Trump a chance when I realized the Democrats were lying about things. And that's why other people do. The media is digging their own grave because they lie. And then when people notice they lie, they don't trust the media. When the Democrats lie, people don't trust the Democrats. And then that's how you wind up with people who go to Donald Trump, because you say, I actually don't think Donald Trump is lying the way the Democrats do. Donald Trump lies about stupid shit, or he exaggerates things that don't matter, the size of his crowd or anything like this. But it's weird to watch him because the way he speaks is just what's on his mind. He just tells you what he thinks about things. And the Democrats don't do that. The Democrats lie and manipulate and do all these things to make themselves seem better and Donald Trump seem worse. It's like, just tell the truth about Donald Trump and people will make up their minds. But they lie or they mischaracterize things about Donald Trump. And when ABC does this, it's costing them money. It's costing them viewers. It's costing them respect. It's costing them credibility. And they can't help themselves. And it's ridiculous. And so now when we talk about ABC, we don't care about ABC. We don't care. Their viewership is less than one episode of Joe Rogan or the Timcast. And it doesn't matter. No one listens to these people anymore. And CNN's in the same boat. This video, let's show this video. This also happened this week. This is hilarious. Check this out. All right, check this out.
I can't tell though. It might just be a blanket. But it's the only cell that's locked. Is he going to shoot it?
The guard makes us turn the camera off while he shoots the lock off the cell door. We go in to get a closer look. It's still not clear if there is something under the blanket.
Oh, it moved. Is there someone there? I thought I saw it move. Is someone there? Or is it just a blanket? I don't know.
I'm a civilian, he says. I'm a civilian.
Okay, so there's a video, and they wind up going outside. I'm going to cut it before we get too far into it. They wind up going outside and doing a bunch of things. That was Clarissa Ward. She works, I guess, for CNN in some capacity. And so this guy in the video, he goes on to say, "Oh, I'm a civilian. I've been in captivity for 3 months, and it's been terrible. My name is Adele I think Gerbal. I can't remember what he says. Adele Gerbal, I think is how it's pronounced. I'm a civilian. I've been here for 3 months. And none of this wound up being true. So CNN shows this video. They put this video up online. They say, look at Clarissa Ward. They're liberating people from Assad's prisons. Assad, the brutal dictator of Syria. And this is a guy. They're releasing him, and the rebels are doing this nice thing, blah, blah, blah. First of all, CNN probably set the whole thing up. I don't know if you noticed. The guy's wearing, they don't show him shooting a lock off the door. The guy is supposed to be in captivity for 3 months. He's wearing clean clothes. The cell is clean. He winds up, they go outside, and he's looking around. He says, wow, this is sunlight. Oh, wow. He's not blinking. He's not acting like he's been kept in the dark for months and months and months. He just, none of this seemed real. It all seemed like, really, CNN probably set the whole thing up to make themselves look heroic. Well, it turns out Adel Gerbal is not who he says he was. His name is actually Salama Muhammad Salama. Same first name, same last name. And this guy he was an intelligence officer for the Assad government. He wasn't imprisoned necessarily by Assad until 1 month ago when he was arrested by the Assad government and he was put in jail for extortion. He's a known torturer. This is a guy who he would extort people when they wouldn't pay him. He would kidnap them. He would torture them. He's an all-around evil guy. And CNN, quote-unquote, liberated this man from an Assad prison. And then they say at the bottom, now they've had to issue basically a little apology at the bottom of their article, which says, hey, it turns out this guy lied. This is his real name. We don't know where he is or have any contact with him. They let him out. He's gone. He just disappeared. This guy who known torturer, extortionist, I think probably, I would assume if you're a torturer, I'm going to guess he's probably killed some people in his life. This is a bad dude. This is a bad guy. And they just let him out. And they look like fools, which they are. And they probably staged this whole thing to liberate a guy, to make themselves look heroic. And instead they look like idiots because this is what journalism is now. It's this, you have to get views. You have to have stories. You have to do these things. It's this rush to be first and put yourself in the action. It's dumb. It is not the way to tell stories. But people think it is because when you put a human face on things, people are more likely to tune in. But CNN is making a mistake that the ABC is making, which is that they just want to be relevant so bad that they will do anything to get people to tune into their show, including probably, allegedly, staging a liberation of a torturer from an Assad prison. It's ridiculous. It's been so stupid this week. The news has been so dumb this week. It's hard to fathom. There are real problems in Syria. There are real things that you could be reporting and real journalism that needs to be done on the ground. This new Islamic State that's taking over Syria, it's probably going to be a big deal. It's going to be the new ISIS. They are not a moderate group. This is the guy leading them is not a moderate. He's not a good guy. He's not a good person. The fact that Assad is also bad doesn't make these guys good. This is not the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is also my enemy. These are not good people. The rebels are not the good guys. I promise you, they are not going to wind up being freedom fighters who liberate the country and set everyone free, and they wind up living in a westernized Syria. That's not going to happen. If it does happen, then I'll say, hey, guess what? I was wrong. Turns out they're really nice guys, and everyone's having tea and watching football on their big screen. It's not going to happen. They're bad dudes. And CNN reporting the story like this, like the rebels are doing a good thing. Look, we're letting people out of prison. These rebels, they're so nice. They're liberating the people. No, you can't make those guys into good guys. And you're actually, and you wound up looking like a fool for trying. You look like a dishonest, lying, I was going to use some bad words, but I'm going to try not to. You look like you're just dishonest. You look dishonest when you do things that appear obviously staged, and even in your production that you're putting on, you wind up doing the wrong thing. You set this whole thing up so you could look good, and not only did everyone see through that, but you also did a bad thing. So CNN, ABC, try and do better. Maybe just try and tell the truth. Don't make yourself part of the story, tell the truth, and try and do actual journalism. You go at the Democrats sometimes. Be fair and balanced and try. Own your bias. Know that just because you go into a story wanting an outcome, that doesn't mean that that is the outcome. It doesn't mean that that's the right answer. Challenge yourself. Challenge your priors. Go in there and try and take your idea apart. That's actually the best way, by the way, to formulate good ideas. Think about your idea, a position you hold, and then try and think of the arguments against your idea, the best arguments against your idea, and try and dismantle it. Try and take down your own ideas, and you know whether or not your idea stands up to scrutiny. This is what debate is about. This is what conversation is about. This is how you know that you aren't just listening to one side. You have to know both sides of the argument. If you don't know both sides of the argument, you've already lost because you don't know whether or not your idea is a good one, because you don't know the arguments against it. And if it doesn't hold up to the arguments against it, then you're on the wrong side and you need to change your mind. I know it's scary. I know people don't like to do it, but it's good. It's sometimes good to change your mind. Just keep that in mind. And that's my message, by the way, to everyone, but especially people who work in journalism and people who work in the media. You need to change your mind when you're wrong. It is important. It's important to be able to do that. And CNN, ABC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, all of these papers and news media, all of it. Just stop doing what you're doing. Be better. That's to be the goal. Be better. And maybe people will come back to you if they start to trust you. But they're not going to trust you if you continue to lie and continue to be one-sided in your coverage of everything. Anyway, that's my advice. I'm giving free advice, so feel free to take it because it is free. I want to just touch on this third topic because we talked about the CEO getting assassinated and people complain about the American healthcare system. And let me tell you, there are some drawbacks to the American system. I think the way that insurance companies are run is ridiculous, and I think that they should be separated from our jobs, and you should buy insurance like you buy car insurance. You should have to do it every 6 months or every year. You should have to shop around and buy insurance that you want, a plan that you want. Separate it from your job entirely. That would be better. Transparent pricing would be better. All of these things. There's a lot of things that would be better. But here is a fact. Healthcare in the United States is better than anywhere in the world. I'm not talking price. I'm not talking availability. I'm talking about the quality of care. The quality of care that you get in the United States is better than anywhere in the world. It is not a question. And we'll use this Canadian story as an example. So people are mad in the U.S., but be grateful you don't live in Canada. So this woman, it doesn't matter what her name is, she's from Manitoba, up in Canada. Where is that? I have no idea. I don't care about Canada. But she basically, for 6 years, has wanted a knee replacement. Now, this is a routine surgery that you can get tomorrow if you want in the United States. You have a problem with your knee, you go to an orthopedic. You can schedule this. It is not a long wait to get a surgery like this in the United States. It's just not. You might have to wait a month, maybe 2 months if you're in a place that doesn't have a lot of doctors. But you go to a city, you can do whatever you want with your knee. If you go and the orthopedic says, yeah, we'll replace it. This is a routine surgery that happens thousands of times a day, okay? She had to wait 6 years to get this surgery approved and to find a doctor who could do it and to do all this stuff. She waited 6 years. Then, because she waited so long for the surgery, she goes in for the surgery. Turns out she's got some dead tissue in her knee. Okay, complicates the surgery a little bit, but no big deal. The doctors remove the dead tissue, and they give her the knee replacement, and then they finish up. But apparently, in Canada, for some reason, or in this particular hospital for some reason, they don't stitch up the wound. It's another doctor who has to do this. So she's done with the procedure. She's had a knee replacement. She has an open wound on her leg. But when they go to transfer her to the other doctor, well, it turns out there's not a bed available because this is Canadian healthcare, and for some reason they scheduled a surgery without both doctors understanding that it would need to be done promptly. So they don't have a bed. So this woman has a surgery. She has an open wound in her knee. They keep her in a bed where she stays for 8 days, waiting for another bed for the specialist to come and sew up her open wound on her knee. Well, I don't know if you know this, They've kind of known about this since the Middle Ages, but having an open wound is not really a good thing. It's kind of bad. It's a portal for infection. And so guess what? Having 8 days of a giant open wound on her leg, a very painful, very traumatizing experience, 8 days later, oh, well, guess what? She has an infection. And what's happened? Oh, more dead tissue in her knee. So the doctors say, well, listen, we don't know if we're going to be able to salvage your leg. It's a possibility, but it's going to involve a series of surgeries, heavy dose of antibiotics for a long time, and there's still a good possibility that you're going to lose this leg. So the woman says, just amputate it, because that was one of the options. 2 doctors actually recommended amputation straight off the bat. So she has an amputation. So she no longer has a right leg. Now, we're talking about a knee replacement surgery. First of all, you had to wait 6 years. Second of all, the doctor who performed the surgery apparently doesn't stitch up the wound. It takes 2 physicians to do this surgery that is so routine in the U.S. that typically you're up and at them. For example, if you have a hip replacement in the United States, you're up and out of the bed the same day walking around. This is routine surgery at this point. And she lost a leg because of it, because the Canadian healthcare system is there's so much bureaucracy, so much red tape, that these doctors didn't even know this problem was going on because they don't talk to each other, because there's so many steps to go through from one to the other. To transfer her from one hospital to the other, there were so many loopholes that needed to be closed that she wound up languishing in pain for 8 days before her leg gets cut off. That's that's socialized medicine. That's when every small decision needs to be run up and up and up the chain to a higher power who gets to make these decisions. And be glad we don't live in Canada, because that could be the system. Routine surgery results in amputation of a leg because it took 6 years to happen and 8 days to get a wound stitched up. I guess because every stitch needs to be approved by a health minister somewhere up the line. It's ridiculous. Be glad we don't live in Canada. This is just another reason that we don't have to live in our evil neighbor to the north. Canada's the worst. Not Canadians. Canadians are nice people. The Canadian government, though, is the worst. They're terrible. And Justin Trudeau is about to be ousted, which is going to be great. And this, what's his name? Pierre Poilievre? I follow this guy on Twitter. He's awesome. If he wins an election and changes Canada around, it would be amazing. I would be all for it because he's an awesome dude. Anyway, we are going to leave it there. I got a little rambly today, especially about that first story, because it went down that rabbit hole about the corporate press. You can't get enough of yelling at those guys. They're the worst. I just don't understand it. But I got a little rambly today. I apologize for that, people. Sometimes I get on my ranting, I don't know, hat. I put my ranting hat on and I just go for it. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and any questions, comments, concerns, always and someone asked me recently, actually this week, if things like likes actually matter on YouTube. They really do. It takes no effort. If you watch the video and you go ahead and like the video, it's a big deal, because what it does is any person who interacts with your content, so not just watching's nice, but anyone who interacts with your content, puts a like or a comment on the content, it boosts whatever the metric is that measures user interactions between views. So you look at views and you look at interactions, and the more viewers who interact with the content, the more it boosts it in the algorithm. This is kind of true on Facebook and YouTube especially. And so anyone who likes or comments on stuff, I really appreciate it, because you can tell, for example, when you put out a video, if people start liking it or commenting early in the video does a tremendous more amount of views overall, and you'll have a lot more watch hours, because YouTube will put it in other people's algorithms. It'll go in the up next column for more videos, the more people interact with it. So really, yes, it makes a big difference if you just like and comment on stuff. I do appreciate it. I try to interact with most people who comment on things because I have that luxury. So as always, I appreciate any of that people do. And any comments, questions, concerns, just leave them down below, and we'll go over them next week on the video. Until then, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you next Friday.